Another round of applause for women of the world.
That was so beautiful. I wanted them to stay out just a moment longer to receive that. That was so absolutely beautiful. Thank you, thank you. Women of the World is an internationally renowned ensemble committed to using music to practice and spread the message of peace. And fortunately, we get to hear from them again this evening.
My name is Monique Coleman, and it is my profound pleasure to welcome you to this public launch of UN Women's campaign, Empowering Women, Empowering Humanity. Picture it. And picture it, we will. Tonight, you will hear from dynamic speakers, witness brilliant performers, and see compelling videos. You will leave this event inspired, I assure you. Our goal is to generate excitement, commitment, and momentum to bring into 2015, 20 years after the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us to celebrate, and thank you for joining people across the world to demand that our government does right by women. ever United Nations Youth Champion for the International Year of Youth. I traveled to 24 countries in 6 months so that I could better understand the most pressing and urgent issues that are facing our next generation. And when I came back, I was so overwhelmed by what I saw and experienced, but I knew that I had to pick a focus. I had to really channel my energy into something, and so I wholeheartedly committed to the 3rd Millennium Development Goal, the empowerment of women and girls, because I understand that when you educate a girl, you change the community and you change the world. So delighted to be your host this evening. Now, before we get started, I have to make a few announcements. Normally, I would tell you to cut off your cell phone, but not tonight. All that I ask is that you turn your volume off, and like, if you could ideally not put it on vibrate, because it's the worst when it's sitting there. It's like, we don't want that either. But what we do want is for you to take photos, tweet, text them, share it. Please share this event because we want the world to know about this historical moment in this historical venue. Now, speaking of which, directly to my right is something called the Tree of Hope. So many amazing people have graced this stage, from Billie Holiday, Aretha Franklin, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and on and on and on. And they have all stopped and run to a Tree of Hope for good luck. It has been my childhood dream to stand on this stage, and I never imagined that it would be in this capacity. So I just need you to indulge me for one moment while I go and get my luck from the Tree of Hope. Thank you so much. Well, on with the show, we have an incredible lineup, starting with our very first speaker. She has been a campaigner for human rights and women's rights all of her life. In her home country, South Africa, where she was actively involved in the struggle to end apartheid and on the global stage. From 2005 to 2008, she served as deputy president of her country, overseeing programs to combat poverty and bring the advantages of a growing economy to the poor, with a particular focus on women. Today, she is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and the Executive Director of UN Women, leading a global mission for gender equality. Please join me in warmly welcoming Mzila Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Colleagues and friends, UN Deputy Secretary General Jan Ellenson, women and people of the world, people of New York. We are here to highlight the start of a campaign that commemorates 20 years since the world came together at the 4th World Women's Conference. We celebrate what is still the most comprehensive affirmation of women's rights and empowerment adopted in 1995 by 189 governments. That's a lot of governments. To kick off this campaign, we are taking the UN outside of our offices and bringing it to the community where it will always belong, with the people. Woo! I thank you for joining us. We are here at this historic Apollo Theater for an evening of reflection, resolve, celebration, and performance. Our goal is to rekindle the spirit of Beijing, to re-energize all of us in our work to advance women's rights, women's empowerment, and gender equality. The vision laid out in Beijing with 12 critical areas of concern for women still resonates deeply around the world. It is still unfinished business. We need to do more in these critical areas, and they include reducing women's share of poverty. Do you agree or do you agree? Wave your fan if you agree. It includes improving access to health and education. It includes ending violence against women. It includes ensuring women's full participation in decision making. It includes ensuring women's equal opportunities in the economy. It includes removing gender stereotypes and increase women's roles in the media. And it includes protecting the human rights of all women and girls. So, this is our work in progress. Today, though, we mourn the loss of a human rights defender, our sister, Salwa Lugais, who embodied the vision of Beijing. She was assassinated yesterday in Benghazi, Libya. We condemn this murder. We continue, I feel very emotional about this. We continue, however, with the work that she started. And I'd like you to stand up just for a moment of silence. May she rest in peace. Since we kicked off this campaign online a few weeks ago, we have reached a global audience of 40 million people on social media. Now we are calling on people in all corners of the world to join us over the next year and to be engaged. Picture it. 5, 10, 15 years from now on, a world in which life is much better for women and girls, and therefore better for humanity. In the 20th century, and since the Beijing Women's Conference, we have seen some changes in all parts of the world. Globally, 139 constitutions include guarantees on gender equality. 125 countries outlaw domestic violence, and 117 outlaw sexual harassment in the workplace. 20 years ago, 11% of parliaments had women. 11% of parliamentarians were women, and today, 22% of MPs are women. Progress, but yet we need more and faster. 20 years ago, 40% of women were engaged in waged and salaried employment. Today, 48% of women are engaged in salaried employment. Progress, yes, but slow, too little. 20 years ago, less than 75% of girls were enrolled in primary school. Today, 90% of girls are enrolled in primary school. We have to work harder on the quality, but the fact that we now enroll girls in these large numbers is progress. 20 years ago, twice as many women died in pregnancy and childbirth. That has been something that has challenged us, and now half of the women die in childbirth. However, 800 women still die every day, and most of them die from diseases and conditions that can be prevented. Today, the prevalence of female genital mutilation is declining, but 30 million girls are at risk of being cut during the next decade. This we have to stop. Today, all countries in the world have alarming figures of violence against women. 1 of 3 women in the world lives with physical and sexual violence. And today, all countries in the world have a pay gap between men and women continue to perform the vast majority of low-paid and unpaid care work. While progress has been made in the past 20 years, no country in the world has reached absolute and full gender equality. We salute the countries that have made progress and all the efforts that has been made by all the nations. We salute the women of the world for their triumphs as well as their tears. We welcome men and boys as partners in the fight for gender equality, a fight they must own and give it their all. I have no doubt this is a huge task, but it is not mission impossible. It is a mission of our time. We can be the 21st century game changers, and together we can cross the line. I remember as if it were yesterday, the world came together to end apartheid and to help us in our struggles in our home, South Africa. If the people of the world were to come from all walks of life, from presidents of countries, CEOs of companies, sports personalities, artists, youth, and you and me, to do what the freedom-loving people of the world did for South Africa to help to end apartheid, gender equality will be history. We don't have that yet. The date being contemplated by our member states to aim to end this injustice, and I quote, to achieve gender equality and empowerment of women and girls by 2030. That is what is aimed by our member states in their latest discussion paper on preparing for post-2015. So there is a date to end gender equality that is being contemplated. An expiry date. Let us make this a reality. We are setting our sights on this date of 2030. We are giving gender inequality an expiry date. 2030. This should be the beginning of the end of gender equality. We launched this Beijing+20 campaign, this roadmap to 2030 with you here today in the Apollo Theatre in Harlem is to strengthen our collective resolve. I invite you now to sit back, relax, and enjoy our video on the 20th anniversary of the Beijing Women's Conference. This is Beijing+20, the movie brought to you by UN Women.
I declare the NGO Forum on Women, Beijing 1995, open!
We are all witnessing a historic moment, a moment which is characterized by unprecedented solidarity.
Let us stop violence against women.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
"189 nations adopted the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, a visionary roadmap for equality between men and women. Nearly 20 years later, we have made great progress. But we still have a long way to go.
Much has been achieved,
But much more needs to be done, and it can be done.
Picture it. Picture a world where all girls and boys go to school. A world without gender stereotypes. A world where there's equal pay for equal work. A world without child marriages. An end to violence against women and girls. This is not a women's issue. This is an issue for humanity.
I'm working for a world where women are safe from violence, where girls can grow up safe, healthy, and strong.
Together, we must turn this picture into reality. Empowering women, empowering humanity, picture it.
Kalpana. Представьте себе это.
Imagínalo.
Imagine. 展望未来.
Khayalo. Picture it.
According to a recent World Health Organization report, 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical or sexual violence. These are our sisters, our daughters, our aunts, our mothers. This must stop. But what do we do to create this change? And what role are young people and men playing? Our next presenters, who also happen to be very good friends of mine, use theater as a vehicle to empower young women to be brave, confident, socially conscious leaders while exploring their own challenging circumstances. So please, join me in welcoming, hailing from Brooklyn but seen all over the world, Girl Be Heard.
You are the soldier, mother, you are the soldier. Mama, you walked me through each of the 5 boroughs, from Liberia to the Congo, from Palestine to Mexico. Wherever there is war, wherever there is hunger, mother, you are the soldier, mother, you are the soldier.
Imagine a world where violence has ended. I would be able to walk down the street without fear of being harassed or raped. I wouldn't have to scream fire instead of rape.
We will have equal opportunity to education and jobs.
I will be able to decide when I'm ready to have a baby.
I wouldn't be afraid to walk down an empty street by myself.
I wouldn't have to worry about a pimp exploiting me.
I wouldn't have to justify my short skirt or worry that my friendliness is asking for it.
I wouldn't have to live in fear of becoming victim to random shooting in a public place.
I am here because violence against women is a human rights violation.
Up to 70% of women around the world will experience violence in her lifetime.
I am here because I have a voice. I can speak out. We are ready for change.
I'm ready to make the future brighter.
Will you stand with us? We are Girl Be Heard. And while you may see a girl, we see the future.
In the last century, This sign, the V, was for victory, for happiness. But we are in another century. And just now, this V means the only thing that binds together women across the world. This V, unfortunately, is for violence. Violence that engulfs us at some stage in our life, whether we are unborn, little babies, little girls, adolescent girls, women, or grandmothers. Somehow society seems to have taught our men that it is only by brutalizing us that they become men. What do we do to change this situation? In the Hindu philosophy, the first being was half female, half male, and science has taught us that this, in fact, is true. So what do we do to stop men crushing not only us, but the female tender selves within them? And what do we do to empower ourselves not to take this lying down, not to take this silently, not to take it as though that's the only way society can go? It's time to break the silence. It's time to teach our men that to be gentle is what is manly, to be vulnerable is being a man, and to teach ourselves to say, enough. Empowering women, empowering humanity. Picture it.
Thank you. Leave it to me. Our next speaker is a champion of gender equality and well-versed in conflict resolution and mediation. He's been president of the UN General Assembly, special envoy of the UN Secretary General for Darfur, and the first Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. He was a member of the UN's mediation missions in the war between Iran and Iraq. He served as Sweden's foreign minister, and he was also Sweden's ambassador to the United States. Today, he serves as Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Please welcome Jan Eliasson.
Dear friends, what an inspiring, hopeful, and energizing event and audience. It's great to be here with all of you to celebrate the world's Women's March towards full empowerment. This is your century, this is the century of the women, and this is good news in a world of bad news these days. Since Beijing 1995, we have come a long way on women and education, women and health, women in the workforce, and women in public life. Thank you all for helping realize these achievements for women, and indeed, fundamentally also, achievements for man and mankind. At the same time, in today's troubled world, we see discrimination, violence, and atrocities against women and girls. In Pakistan last year, Malala was shot in the head by extremists. She recovered miraculously and continued her struggle for education for girls. In April, the world watched in horror as more than 200 Nigerian girls were abducted by terrorists from a place where they should have felt safe, their school. We cannot rest until we secure the release of these innocent victims and make sure that all girls and all women are protected. Protected from threats, from attacks, from sexual violence, so that they can fulfill their potential and live their dreams. Dear friends, today's launch of the Beijing+20 campaign is not a ceremonial commemoration. It's a celebration and a call to action. We celebrate that more girls are in school than ever before, but we also have to face the reality that less than a handful of countries have achieved full gender equality at all levels of education. And in too many parts of the world, pregnant women fear having a daughter because they know she will be subjected to female genital mutilation. The UN is working with several countries to abandon this cruel practice. we are beginning to see progress. The African group in the UN General Assembly recently sponsored the first ever resolution against this violation of dignity and physical integrity. Now we must aim to end it. Picture it. Also, more and more women are taking their rightful place in political life. Still, only 21.8% of parliamentarians worldwide are women. We have indeed work to do. Also, fewer women are dying in childbirth. But in places like South Sudan, where I was recently, these preventable and needless tragedies kill 1 in 7 pregnant women. Next year, the member states of the UN will come together to chart a road ahead for the Sustainable Development Agenda. A new set of goals will be established for the world we want, the world we need by 2030. And I am confident that this agenda also will be driven by goals to achieve gender equality, empower women and girls, and fully protect their human rights. Beijing is not just a still unfulfilled promise to women and girls. It is an unfulfilled promise to all of us, women and men, a promise to our shared humanity. The essence of the Beijing vision is that equality for women and girls, equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal participation will build a better world for all of us. That vision is vibrantly alive today here in this legendary Apollo Theater in New York. I can see Aretha Franklin in front of me here. But let us remember, it is also alive in cities, in villages, in schools, workplaces around the world with millions of women and girls standing up for their rights. And here I would like, also on a personal note, having seen these wonderful images from the Beijing Conference 1995, let us also pay tribute to all those who broke new ground, those who stuck their necks out, and those on whose shoulder we stand today. And I see Gloria Steinem in the room, and I think I want you to personify this group of people. So together with all of you, the UN Women under the leadership of my dear friend, sister, colleague from Mlambo-Ngcuka, and the whole UN family so well represented here today, we want to be active partners in our common struggle for human rights, for peace, for justice, for equality for all. That is the spirit of this charter that I always carry in my pocket. We the peoples. There's no peace without development. There's no development without peace. And no lasting peace or sustainable development without respect of human rights. And those human rights are like Hillary Clinton defined just recently. So, remember, we have to do this together. Governments, parliamentarians, civil society, private sector, then we can succeed. Remember, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Let's go to work. Thank you very much.
For government security and defense policy. Please help me welcome Norway's Minister of Defense, Ine Eriksen Søreide.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled to be able to join you in this anniversary and this kickoff. I think it is a wonderful thing to see so many people lined up, sitting here and wanting to hear a message on women's rights. In September 2009, I attended a meeting with Hillary Clinton in the UN. She said one thing that I had brought with me. ever since. When asked about violence against women, she said the following: "It's not cultural, it's criminal." And I cannot agree more. We sometimes hear about honor killings. Where's the honor in it? I think we have to all stand up and join in behind Hillary Clinton's words. The other thing I took with me from the meeting was that it was the first time that there was a majority of men around the table. The only way we can get any headway in this is to engage men. That's why I'm glad to see men and women here today. Coming from a country like Norway, I sometimes have to explain our wealth. A lot of people think it stemmed from oil and gas. Well, oil and gas is good to have. But the most important reason why we are a well-off country is the following. We have a full participation of women in all sectors of society, including the workforce. That is the most, and I would say the absolute most important part of both our country's wealth and other countries. If you involve and include women, you will have a much better society, and you will also have equality, peace, and prosperity. But we still have a way to go. We still need to include women in peace processes all over the world. I see this as a defense minister. There are too few women included, and you cannot make lasting peace unless you include women both in the negotiations and the work afterwards. We have seen this in so many conflicts, and I hope that the focus on UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and all that has followed will actually make this happen once. I come from a country with a tradition of female defense ministers. I sometimes get asked if it's possible for a man to become a defense minister in Norway. And I say, yes, it is, but he will have to work hard. And I think I will end by portraying a person which I'm tremendously proud of as a Norwegian defense minister. Major General Kristin Lund was just appointed the first female force commander in UN history. But I think it is a step in the right direction. When you have a female force commander of a UN operation, I think that will make the road shorter to also achieving all the other goals we would like to see achieved when it comes to women, peace, and security. This, ladies and gentlemen, is just the beginning. Now, as Jan Eliasson said, get to work. Thank you.
We show our manhood by how we treat our women, our girls, our mothers, our sisters.
Violence against women and girls is a global problem. It harms women, families, communities, and societies.
Domestic violence continues to be a massive, unspoken of problem around the world, of course.
أنا أتمنى أيضاً لابنتي أن كما أتمنى للمرأة في العالم.
It's an objective fact that if you want to solve some of these huge kind of bigger problems of extreme poverty, you have to engage the women. That they're the ones who will get it done.
earned his reputation as a respected human rights advocate. As a journalist, he reported on survivors of sexual violence. He's an author and a lecturer. He's also co-founder and executive director of Man Up, whose mission is to engage young people in a global movement to end gender-based violence and advance gender equality. Please welcome Jimmy Briggs.
I had to let it marinate because I grew up obsessed with Showtime at the Apollo, so I like that. It is an honor to be a part of today's recognition and celebration of the seminal Fourth World Congress on Women in Beijing. The past 20 years give us cause for reflection upon the vast successes achieved by advocates before us, promoting gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. Still, as we know from seemingly never-ending dispatches from around the world, and as close as central Harlem, where we now congregate, the struggle continues. The Beijing gathering inspired countless women and girls, as well as more than a few men, to focus on the lives of disempowered and oppressed women in ways they never had before. As a father, son, partner, and one of the handful of men from whom you'll be hearing today, I stand proudly, resolutely with my sisters. As a former journalist, I know that for far too long, the absence of men and boys has been an impediment to lasting progress. Achieving gender equality and the prevention of violence against women is simply impossible without changing the lives of young people and men. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for everything that you do. Our next speaker is an award-winning spoken word poet, right? Yes, and the author of Man Up, just making sure I wasn't mixing it up, Reimagining Modern Manhood, a memoir that challenges what he calls the limiting and destructive narrative of toxic masculinity. I love that. Somebody, you're getting some love already, Carlos. Carlos, where are you? Please welcome Carlos Andreas Gomez.
When a woman's body is a riddle, to solve or steal the answer for. When her voice is only heard in 2 volumes, too soft or too loud. When for too many women it's neither. The sound is turned off. When she's overqualified, underpaid, overworked, understated, then overlooked when it's time for a promotion. When a passed-out 16-year-old girl becomes a forgotten city wall, a blighted building, a blow-up doll. When rape becomes a fashion critique, then a sob story about 2 football players losing their way. When owning your own body is understood when it comes to me. But still in federal appellate courts for my wife, my 2 sisters, 6 aunts, every mother, daughter, woman in the Apollo right now, but your smiles are not non-consensual. Your frown's a negligent mother. When the miracle of a woman's body is mandated into flaw. Because old men who drink together say it is so, who bend and invent words they use as proof, claim politics, claim law, claim religion. When my 7th grade student gets catcalled on the way to school by a middle-aged man and everyone in the room giggles, rolls their eyes, calls it Tuesday. when women are called girls. Girls are called young women. An 11-year-old in Texas who is gang raped by 20 men is called seductress, called a spider who lured them in, called anything but human. When Delhi, when Eastern Congo, when Steubenville, when U.S. Naval Academy, when your basement, while you were refilling chips during the Super Bowl, when will men drop their arms? Bodies as weapons or props. Pry open our rusted gates, remove the masks, offer the world our softness. When will hands exist to hold instead of take, mold instead of break? When will our tears stream baptism, chest be shelter, lips a front door, my throat first and foremost made for song, made to say the words. I love you. I'm sorry. Beautiful. I'm scared. I'm so tired of breaking, of being anything but the shaking magic in my gut. Please, just hold me, please. I love you so much.
So deeply, but cannot craft into such beautiful poetry. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for that. Thank you. Now, our next speaker needs little to no introduction. She co-founded Ms. Magazine in 1972 and has been a pioneer in the women's movement for more than 30 years. Author of the best-selling book, Revolution from Within, a book of self-esteem. We know her, we love her. She is a recipient of so many awards. Please welcome Gloria Steinem.
Two great-hearted men who preceded me. I think in some ways, if you can say there's more virtue where there's more choice, they who could have the choice for privilege and don't take it are more virtuous than those of us who have less choice. And the third man, too, right? It's incredible to some of us that we're about to celebrate 20 years since Beijing. So I just want to remind us that we're also celebrating 100 years since the first global gathering of women for peace in the early months of World War I, the birth of the International League of Peace and Freedom. And women who demanded to be part of peacekeeping. Demands that were later reflected in the UN's Resolution 1325. It took a little while. There's a lesson there. And today we're celebrating both anniversaries as they affect us as flesh and blood women and men. First, I think 100 years ago we realized our peacekeeping powers, not because we're better or smarter than men, but because we don't have our masculinity to prove. It's not about biology, it's about the politics of gender. And we've seen this proved successful in peace efforts more recently in places of conflict as diverse as Ireland and Liberia. In Beijing 20 years ago, we saw ourselves as deserving of human rights As you heard from Hillary, women's rights are human rights, and generations of women now know that we can't be separated from the mainstream. We are the mainstream. Both cases helped us to know that we are not alone and that together we can create change regardless of what's on any piece of paper. True change grows from the bottom like a tree. As Gilabat, my dear friend from India, always says, it's a banyan tree. It spreads its roots. But because we now claim our right over our own lives and bodies, we have upset the patriarchies that would control females as the means of reproduction. We learn about production in college and our high schools and our schools, but we don't learn about the even more important fact of who controls reproduction. Wherever there is racism, this control is even more necessary to maintaining racial difference, as well as wherever there is a difference of caste or class or ethnicity or nationality or sexuality and more. Violence and control have become so severe that for what may be the first time in history, there are now more males than females on Spaceship Earth. So I am especially proud to be part of a variety of organizations and groups that are striving to work on this. For instance, Equality Now is cataloging and going after the laws that are an expression of this bias. And we know that in the great majority of countries, about 128 out of 143, the laws are unequal. The law itself codifies the inequality of women. It is that we must pledge on this anniversary to name, to go after, to shame, to understand, and truly to transform. Of course, we know that girls are disproportionately denied their human rights, but it is codified on paper, and that is what Equality Now and many other organizations are striving to change. Every person can be an activist. I hope we don't worry about what we should do. We just do whatever we can. I'm so proud that we have UN Women as our guide and champion worldwide and our great leader of UN Women. And I hope that we finally understand that the human race is like a bird with two wings. And if one wing is broken, no one can fly.
Women don't have equal rights yet around the world, and so working towards that is important until that happens. You know, I think I'm one of the very lucky women in the world that I have a good life and I get to do the things that I want to do, but I don't really feel at peace about the fact that that's not the case for other women around the world. Like, that doesn't feel right. It's truly deeply wrong, and so that's why women's rights are important.
I think that the world would be an amazing place to live. Well, it is, actually, but it would be a better place to live the day that all the rights are going to be for everybody, no matter if it's women or not.
I think that women's rights are important, that so one day it will not even be a question.
If we don't respect women's rights, there's no human rights. If we don't respect women's rights, there's no children's rights. If we don't respect women's rights, there's no men's rights.
I went to law school and I learned a lot of women's rights, and that was when I thought, oh my God, this is important. You know, I'm about to be a woman. You know, I'm still a girl. I'm still 19 years old, but I'm about to be 25, 30, 40, inshallah. And these are the things that I need to know and also share this knowledge with everyone.
I know women in my country and in my continent who are really fighting and started fighting years ago. That gave me the possibility of being who I am now. I'm just taking advantages from what I got from them and from their fights. And I'm just glad to be who I am.
I have a daughter, and when I had my daughter, I realized, you know, when people would say, oh well, women can't do that, I'd look at my daughter and think, yes she can. Of course she can.
As a human being, I deserve my right. I deserve to be respected. I'm not disposable.
I don't think I'm half a man. I don't think I'm quarter a man. I'm a woman, and I'm strong as a woman must be.
Hello again. Hi everybody. So right now is your turn to sing with us. Are you ready? I'm sure you can sing with us. And Debbie will show you which parts. So we're going to divide the room in two parts. Right there. So right and left. You two up there. Right and left. Oh, wow. And everybody sings. Hey, you're in lot. We don't see. All right, so this side, I want you to sing with me. Couleur, café, que j'aime ta couleur café. Yeah, that was great. Can we do it one more time? Que j'aime ta couleur café. Perfect. Okay, so the whole thing. Couleur, café, que j'aime ta couleur café. One more time. Couleur, café, que j'aime ta couleur café. Great, that was awesome. That's so easy up here. And now this side, I want you to do a kind of a rhythm part. Couleur café, 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 que j'aime ta couleur café, couleur café, couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café, alors j'entends murmurer, tout est bracelet, joli bracelet, à tes pieds il se balance couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café, couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café, couleur café. Que j'aime ta couleur café, couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café. C'est quand même fou l'effet que ça fait de te voir rouler ainsi des yeux qui déhanchent. Si tu fais comme les cafés, rien qu'à m'exciter, rien qu'à m'énerver. Ce soir la nuit sera blanche, couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café, couleur café, que j'aime ta couleur café. L'amour sans philosophie, c'est comme le café, très vite passé. Mais que veux-tu que j'y fasse? La marque de café, et c'est terminé. Pour tout oublier, on attend tout ça se danse. Coula, coula, café, coula, café, coula, oui, café, coula, coula, café, coula, café, je me donne coula, café, coula, café, coula, que je me donne coula, café, coula, café, coula, que je me donne coula, que je me donne coula, que je me donne coula.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Next is a pioneer in another arena. Yes? Actually, no. We're all pioneers tonight, but we're actually going to watch a video. Just kidding. This is live theater, okay? Y'all know I'm just milking this moment because I want to be up here. Just kidding. Tonight is about this great moment, this great live moment that we're all living in, but it is also about the future and rallying the collective energy in that direction. Many of tomorrow's leaders are the age of our next speaker. She goes by the name Diana and is just 16 years old. She is a vital voice with the New York State Youth Leadership Council, an organization that empowers young immigrants. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Diana.
Your Excellency and honored guest, my name is Diana, and I am a girl. I am a girl advocate at the Working Group on Girls. And I believe in a better world for all girls and women. I am probably the only one here tonight prepared my remarks while finishing my high school exams. That is exactly why I am here today. Because my father risked his life to provide his children, especially his 6-year-old daughter, a better life, which included an education. I feel very privileged. My vision is a future in which education is not a privilege, but a right. A right for the girls out. Tonight, as we celebrate the 20th year of Beijing, I am here to represent girls and youth everywhere to partner in the effort for equality for girls and women. I believe in a world where all girls can go to school, where girls and women do not fear violence, where every girl has health care, where no girl is forced into early marriage. Together, we can make this happen. We can work with boys and men, with governments and civil societies to create and sustain equality for all girls and women in my lifetime. Please join me and thank you.
Education, liberation, bring back our girls. Education, liberation, bring back our girls.
Women should have hand in hand regardless of where on this earth they stand, whether it be Asia, Europe, Africa, or America. But when an education is pursued, it might have been the glue holding together these girls' hopes and dreams, but instead brought them to terror, kidnapped by those who wish to see them not as human beings, but as lambs, a retail on the body market, a target for oppression.
I'm scared this will mean that other women will fear their own birth-given right to feel the thirst for knowledge, for progression. We must demand that a stand be taken against this insidious plan. All lives, whether they be female or male, deserve to be worth more than a handful of coins for their skin, flesh, bone.
Our bodies are our own. No man, government, or religion should have first-hand decision on our body, our happiness.
We are not merely physical beings, but rather have a soul and a brain, a story worth hearing.
School is meant to be a safe haven.
For some, a death sentence.
276 girls missing is way too many.
One is way too many.
Protect the youth of our future, no matter what nationality.
Bring our girls home. Education, liberation, bring back our girls. Education, liberation, bring back our girls.
Malala Day is not my day. Today is the day of every woman, every boy, and every girl who have raised their voice for their rights.
Girls like Aksa Riemann, whose home was destroyed by flooding. When the devastation prevented her from returning to school, she too spoke out to fight for her education.
We will come to school even if we have to struggle for it. We will help our people by replacing everything they have lost in the floods.
Beeb Riemann, Aksa's aunt, believes that educating the younger generation is the only way to a better future.
We are educating our children to get rid of poverty. We hardly have enough to eat or feed the children, but we're still educating them so that they become better people.
According to UNICEF, some 57 million children of primary school age worldwide are not in school, and more than half of them are girls. Factors such as poverty, natural disasters, the prevalence of early marriage, and cultural and extremist attitudes mean that many girls will face severe obstacles in getting an education.
Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world.
She's the founder and president of the Center for Social Inclusion. She's been a civil rights attorney and a policy advocate. She's lobbied the U.S. Congress and developed programs to transform structural racial inequality in the United States and South Africa. Now she's the general counsel to Mayor de Blasio. Please welcome Maya Wiley.
Thank you. I stand here humbly before you on behalf of one of my heroines, the first First Lady of the City of New York, Charlene McCray, who we call Flo Nice. And in New York City, as the largest city in the country, and a truly global city, because we do have residents here from all over the world, I greet you and say that we in this administration are committed to changing inequality for everyone. And at the core of that is changing gender inequality as well. We can't, as the mayor said when he campaigned to be mayor of the city of New York, he said, we are going to be one city rising. And one city cannot rise if 53% of its population is not rising with it. And I wanted to share a story because I think it's so important that we recognize real people when we think about these issues. So Shanita Simmons is 25. She has 3 children and a 3-generation household, including her husband, her mother, and her brother. Her husband's laid off. He stays home and takes care of their 3 children, including an 8-month-old baby. She works an 8-hour-a-day job at a Brooklyn, Kentucky fried chicken. That's $270 a week after taxes. In a lot of parts of the world, that's a lot of money. Unfortunately, not here in New York. So one of the things I think that we have to think about when we think about this mission are the Shanitas of the world and of New York. And I want to raise up the voice of another heroine who transitioned a few weeks ago, Maya Angelou, because for me, her literature and poetry has always been a buoy and sometimes a life raft, supporting me on the rough seas of womanhood, particularly Black womanhood in America. And Maya Angelou said famously, each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women. And we all of us must stand up, and I have some good news tonight. Because this administration has stood up for women. Because we understand that the future of this city, in fact the future of the world, depends on it. And when we care for the future, that means we must care for women. Because if a child is going to be in a home, the mother must have the job to pay for it. Which is why we're building 200,000 more units of affordable housing. We are standing up. And we know that each time for a mother to go to work with confidence and conviction, she must know that her child is adequately cared for. So for the first time in the history of the city of New York, we are creating universal, quality, pre-kindergarten for everyone in this city. And we know that a child cannot grow up healthy when his mother cannot stay home when he is sick and be expected to buy groceries at the end of the month. And that is why we, working with the City Council, actually increased paid sick days, 40 hours a week a year, everyone in a small employer to a large employer, 500,000 more low-wage workers in this city able to care for themselves and their families when they're sick. We are standing up. And we're not done. Because we know that for a woman to be able to be rising up and helping the city rise, she must be home safe. And in a city where, unfortunately, we know that 40% of all felonies, 33% of all rapes are domestic violence. And we're committing resources both to our mayor's office for domestic violence, and we are reinvigorating this city's commission on women's issues, because we are going to continue to stand up. When I say we're going to stand up, I want to know that every last one of you is standing up too, because we know we have to do this together, and we in this administration commit to standing up with United Nations, to standing up with UN Women, to celebrate and carry forward the campaign for women's equality, because we are not done.
speakers that we have a very extensive program, and to please keep our remarks to the allotted time, not that you were just, girl, I was back there doing this, saying, yes, I am standing with you, but I was already standing, so it wasn't as impactful. Anyway, next we have a pioneer, also in city government. She served on New York City Council for 12 years, among her many accomplishments, successfully helping to push through the nation's first law to protect domestic workers. She's now Manhattan Borough President. Please welcome Gail Weaver.
It's great to be here, and I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and the City Council for paid sick days, but I just want you to know he got all the credit and I took all the hell because I passed it originally. Just so we're clear. Everybody deserves credit, I understand that, but I am glad it's a law. I'm glad you're here, and you know, the great news is with the City Council and the Mayor and the Borough President, we're all working together. In talking to the members of the City Council today, they were just stating that there's more money for seniors, many of whom are women. There's more money in terms of keeping the community centers open till 11 p.m. at night shift. And what that means is it's men and women, but it's certainly families. The fact that your kids can be safe and teenagers can have a place to go, to me, that's a women's issue. That's what matters to me. So I'm just here to say two things. One is, I am a big believer, obviously, in the issue of stopping as much as we can women and violence. That's number one. And number two is just this balance of work and family. We have not solved it. The number one issue for women coming out of college or even high school today is, how do I do it all, Gail? And that's what we're all working on, because that means that we have the jobs and the child care, and we have a safe environment and so on. And we also have to have, it's easier said than done, a flexible work environment. It's easier said than done, particularly with the demands of getting a job and something that's not low wage and has a benefit. So we're working on all that with your help. But I just want to say, I was in Beijing, and this is what I remember, because everybody has a different example. We remember that it was obviously muddy and hot. We could never remember which day was which, but it was both. And then as somebody who was a delegate with the Y, I came with the YWCA, and there was, many of us came from New York. The people who brought us from the hotel in Beijing to the conference drove so fast that one of our friends' husbands was killed, so we remember that. They were crazy drivers. And then when we got there, the young women who were introducing us were great. You would say, what was the weather? They would say, welcome to China. You would ask what time it was, and they would say, welcome to China. You would ask what day it was, and they would say, welcome to China. That's what I remember. We laughed and laughed. Of course, now we're saying welcome to the United States, and we don't know what we're doing, and they're saying take over the world. But the other issue was, for me, was the role of Bella Abzug. Bella's made for volunteers. And what I remember was Bella, this is with me forever. Bella was in a car part of the time. There were very few people who could have a car, but her legs were bothering her, so she was in a car often. And every single woman leader, we didn't know them at all. I mean, we were like there with the Y, we were there with Bella, but we didn't know all these people. You know them all. And Bella hugged and kissed, and every single woman there from around the world knew her, loved her, and she was the leader. And now, I think some years later, again, you in the audience know better, many of these women, because of Bella, are leaders in their own country because of her influence. So I really give her a lot of credit for Beijing and what she has accomplished for all of us. So in conclusion, we obviously need to pass the Women's Equality Act. I don't know what in hell's name they're doing in Albany, but I hope it gets better. And I don't ever forget the work that was not just policy in Beijing, but personal. Everybody who went never, ever forgets one moment of that experience. So it's really important when you're talking policy to figure out how it has a personal impact. And for me, we want to carry this out because of the personal impact. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker has been a noted feminist and activist for women's human rights for 4 decades. She's the founding director and a senior scholar at the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers. And she consults for many United Nations agencies. Please welcome Professor Charlotte Bunch.
Many of us have waited many years to do that. I'm here, I think, most of all, to speak as a veteran of the Beijing process, who, like Bella and Peggy Antrobus and Joan Dunlop, and many, many women around the world who I wish were here with us today, spent far too many hours in the basement of the UN, way beyond what we expected as feminist activists to be our work, in order to help make the Beijing platform happen. And I think what I want to say was most empowering about Beijing is that it was a moment when you could see women taking our power and working across boundaries and borders of geography, of race, of culture, of many boundaries to make something important happen for women. And in that process, women took their power and saw that we did indeed have the capacity to put issues on the global agenda that had been only in the margins before. And this was the work, I think, of the women's movement for 4 decades. But Beijing symbolizes that moment when these issues came together and were seen by the world. And in fact, today, if you think about violence against women, human trafficking, reproductive and sexual rights, feminization of poverty, girls' education, child rights, these are all issues that really came out of the shadows of the work of women's groups around the world and onto the global agenda of the UN and the governments, primarily through Beijing, but also through the world conferences of the 1990s, where women worked in caucuses for the Rio Summit on Environment, for the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, for the Cairo Population and Development Conference, the Copenhagen Social Summit, etc. So Beijing was not the movement, but it was the moment that the movement saw how we could change the world. And I think that's what we want to celebrate today. And I want to emphasize crossing borders and boundaries, because I think Beijing would never have been possible if women hadn't spent several decades arguing and learning and listening to be able to work across those boundaries, across the boundaries of race, across the boundaries of class, of culture, across north, south, east, west. This didn't happen overnight. This was the work of women listening to each other through all the world conferences, fighting with each other, and learning how all of our lives were shaped not only by gender, but also by all the other factors in our lives, by race, by culture, by sexual orientation, by age, by diversities, many, many factors. And the key to the success in Beijing was understanding that we had something in common as women that would not try to erase that difference, but would embrace that difference as the way to understand all of the ways in which women had to be free. And I think embody the slogan today that if you do indeed empower all women in all our diversity, you could indeed empower all of humanity for the first time. So when I talk and think back about Beijing, it's that effort to cross boundaries and borders, which also meant crossing sectors, the ways in which the NGOs and civil society groups and grassroots women worked with governments, and for many, for the first time in their lives, had an opportunity to speak directly to those who represented their government at the UN or in these conferences, and realized that we as citizens have the right to expect our government to protect us, and began that process that many are engaged in now of entering government or holding government more accountable. And many, many women, often unknown, who worked inside of the UN in their jobs, not only in their predecessors to UN Women, the women's agencies, but throughout the UN system, to advance slowly the agenda of women. It was that working across sectors, across boundaries, that enabled us to get to this point. And that, I think, is the challenge I would put to us for the future, which is how do we continue to work so that we don't always have a world as we do now, where enormous change has happened for many of us, but many, many women and men are still left behind. And how we begin to address that gap so that all women, all men will benefit from what the women's movement and feminism and movements against other forms of oppression have brought to the world for many of us. That to me is the challenge of the Beijing+20. And to me that's rooted in understanding, we've heard the inspiring words about women's rights or human rights. This was a movement, a decade long, that we got Hillary to represent in Beijing because women understood that without seeing human rights, without seeing women's rights as fundamental human rights, you could not break through the barriers of seeing women as only a question of culture. And in fact, what is so important about human rights is that we understand human rights are universal. They are not subject to the compromise or the subordination of women in the name of culture, in the name of religion, in the name of national expediency, in the name of conflict, in the name of war. Women's human rights are non-negotiable. And of course, as I said before, they are indivisible. They are connected to the human rights of all other groups. So when I picture empowerment and equality, I picture implementation and resources for the Beijing platform to become reality. I picture governments deciding to implement and put their resources behind those words. I picture international organizations working to implement those words. I picture all of us at the civil society level being not only empowered, as many of us are, but enabled with the resources to take this movement further. And it needs to continue to expand to embrace more fully the marginalized groups like widows, like lesbians, like refugees, like indigenous women, like migrant women. Over the last 2 decades since Beijing, all of these groups have spoken more clearly and more forcefully about what the principles of Beijing mean for them. And Beijing+20 is the chance to really give voice, to make clear that all of these women, even when not named in the Beijing platform, are part of this revolution for change. Finally, I want to say to the governments and to the UN and to those in the international community that I think we have heard already many of the ways that women are progressing over the last 20 years. But what bothers me is the daily reminders of the backlash. And I say backlash because I don't think it's just happenstance that women are still being beaten. In fact, in many cases we see that some of this violence is very specifically directed at keeping women in their place. It is women who are being beaten because they have spoken out. It is women who are being beaten. It is women who are being sexually assaulted in campuses all over the United States because they refused to be seen as the property of the man who took them out. It is women like the schoolgirls in Nigeria that we've talked about, but also like the woman that was assassinated from Libya, Sawa, but many others who've been assassinated over the last 2 years, the femicides in Central America. These are not just accidental deaths. These are very often women who are killed because they are trying to speak up, not only on women's rights, but on all the social justice issues of our day. So one of the key priorities of Beijing+20 is to find more effective ways to protect the women human rights defenders of our era. And I think these are the women who are lighting the way. I love the youthful energy of the women that have been on the stage to remind us that, in fact, women and more male supporters are lighting the way for all of humanity and speaking up. And the real challenge, I think, for the international community, for those of us who work in civil society at the international level and governments and the UN, is how can we take this next year, 2015, to rise to the occasion to support such women and to give voice and space to their visions and struggles for change, because this is the picture that I think really brings us to the empowerment of the future. Thank you.
I told you that it was going to be a very inspiring evening, and it is that. I have to remind us that we are a little bit over time, maybe a lot, and so we want to do our best to stay to the times that are allotted. Next, we have a real treat. She's a 2-time Grammy Award winner who has broken every glass ceiling in the guitar world for women. She has performed as a soloist in 40 countries, appeared at the White House by invitation of President and Mrs. Obama, is the founding director of the Juilliard Guitar Department, and she's also the subject of a documentary on her own life, which will be broadcast nationally on public television this November. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Sharon Isbell.
Given the theme of today's event, it's only appropriate that I should include something by a woman. And I'd like to start with a work by the late Israeli composer Naomi Shimmer, an arrangement that I did of one of her songs, and then segue to Spain with music from Asturias by Isaac Albéniz.
Beautiful. Please have one more round of applause. So for those of you who did also watch, or who do watch Amateur Night, you know who the Sandman is, right? He comes and gets you. Well, in an observance of time, I'm gonna have to do the Sandman tonight, but I will not come and get you. I will just bring you a flower a little early so that we can really get everyone out of here on time. So I'll be the nice Sandman. I'll be like the sand girl, the sweet Sandman. Not that he's not sweet, because I would love to meet him. Anyway, our next speaker is the chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women, New York. Yes. And UN representative of the International Alliance for Women in New York. Please join me in welcoming Seung Ying Yoon.
In 1995, I was the UN liaison for the NGO Forum, that mammoth gathering of civil society during the Beijing Women's Conference. How big was it? Well, about 7,000 US citizens went to Beijing that fall. At the time, it was the largest deployment ever of American civilians to a single international destination. I normally sleep 8 hours a night, but for 2 years, sleep was something that came only between crises. Our computers crashed when the number of registrations reached 10,000. We couldn't believe that the numbers would go up, but they did, and they reached 30,000. The yearning to be part of this event spread across the globe and in every country of the world. When the opening day finally arrived, and you saw the video of Supatra Mastit, who declared the NGO Forum on Women open, I was amazed at the fever pitch of excitement in the stadium. I asked myself, why are they here? And I asked myself, what am I still doing here? And the answer was because 30,000 people and the tens of millions of others that they represented were counting on us. 20 years later, as chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women in New York, I see the same spirit drive thousands of women and men, girls and boys to the annual meeting of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. They come from nearly every country, and as if on a pilgrimage, they are driven to connect with one another and drawn to what they perceive to be the moral authority of the United Nations. And by the way, that meeting takes place right across town, and you're welcome to join us there next March. Will Beijing+20 make any difference? Will 2015 be a turning point? I think the truth is we actually can't be sure. But we often underestimate the power of what the women's movement and what we can collectively do with the United Nations. Let me tell you my favorite Beijing story. About 2 months after the UN Women's Conference ended, a group of Arab women traveled to a remote area to monitor an honor killing. Somehow they got their story out in the face of dire threats that the killers of a young woman were about to be freed. Why did they risk their lives to tell their story? On a radio broadcast, they heard that hundreds of governments had met in Beijing and that they had collectively decided honor killings were against the law. They were inspired to act because they thought the rest of the world was on their side and that the United Nations was on their side. So why am I still here? I am here to keep on earning that trust. And I truly believe that the world's women and girls are counting on us at this moment and at this time. Thank you.
More than a decade ago, our next speaker was a senior legal consultant for the Suriname delegation to the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women at UN headquarters. He has a strong commitment to human rights. Please welcome Henry Leonard McDonald, the permanent representative of Suriname to the United Nations.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I don't have a prepared remarks, but I was just thinking before I came here that I don't know any society, any region in the world where young boys of 10 are being married to women of 40 years old. I also don't know any society or region where things like FGM, female genital mutilation, are being happening to boys. Another problem is that I also don't know any society where there are honor killings, where men are being killed. So, thinking of all of these things, I almost thought that it looks like there is a vendetta against women, but that is not the case. I believe that this is a serious problem. Lately, I've been hearing the issue of violence against women in almost all the speeches of my colleagues at the United Nations. And I strongly urge them, definitely the male colleagues, to see what we as male can do to change this situation. Deputy Secretary General is here, and I can tell him that one of my big dreams is to organize a barbershop conference at the United Nations, where we know what we do in barbershops. We have these discussions in barbershops. But let me tell you, in barbershops we have three issues which we usually discuss. First is sports. Everybody talks about the World Cup right now. Second is politics. And third is women. But never violence against women. So we can use the platform of the United Nations to address the issue of violence against women. We as men can do that. And I hope that we'll be able to do that. Finally, before I close, let me say that the way we should look at this issue is definitely from the heart. We as men should look at it from the heart. Because if there is one woman who nothing should happen with, it's our mom. We all have moms and we love our moms very much. So I'm wondering, why can't we see our mom in every other woman? The second thing is that those who have daughters, we know that our daughters, when they are young, they are in the household and they are safe at home. At one point in their life, they will be going out of the house, out of the household. We men should realize that at that moment, the moment that your daughter is leaving, she is entering a world where 7 out of 10 women will be confronted with some kind of violence, some kind of violence against them. And I believe that we should take that responsibility to make sure that that world outside is safe, so that our girls, when they go into it, they enter a more safer world. Thank you very much for your time.
keeping it real, speaking from the heart about what we feel. Girl power, who wants it? Girl power, we brought it. Girl power, you have it. Girl power, get it! Do you see me? Can you hear my voice? I have ideas and I'm free to make a choice. Are you listening to what I have to say? 'Cause these ideas can change the world someday. I'm a girl, and I'm much more than I seem. I'm a girl, we defend what we believe. Each of us can use our voice, but they all blend better in a song. Separate we're so powerful, but together we are more strong. I'm a girl, and I'm much more than I seem. I'm a girl, we defend what we believe. Each of us can use our voice, but they all blend better in a song. Separate we're still powerful, but together we are more strong.
She's one of the first South Asian women to be seen on TV in the United States, and for the past 15 years has been a celebrated TV anchor, currently with New York One. She is a champion of small business owners and women's entrepreneurs. Please welcome Joya Das.
I think that the word no is probably the worst word that you could ever say to me. And it's probably because I heard it so much growing up as an American girl in an Indian household. No, you can't go to choir. No, you cannot date boys. No, you cannot go to dances. No, you cannot move to New York, Washington, Boston. And no, you cannot become a journalist. So you know what I did? I snuck out to dances. I sang Casey Kasem's Top 40 at the top of my lungs in my family car. I dated boys. I moved to Boston, Washington, and New York City, and guess what? I became a journalist. A TV anchor to boot. But here's the rub. In that entire arduous climb, there was not one person that I could look to as a role model. I think Barbara Walters is great, but I don't see myself in her. I think Christiane Amanpour is great, but I really don't think I look like her either. So what I said about doing this year is interviewing every South Asian entrepreneur that I could get my hands on, female, and start telling her story. Because I want the next generation of South Asian girl to be able to say, I too could become Joya the journalist, Shilpa the DJ, Mani the technologist, Parul the baker, Hemal the lawyer, and Lakshmi, a representative for women at the UN. Because after all, that's why we're here today, isn't it? So we can provide girls and women everywhere choices and opportunities. It was the spirit in which the Beijing+20 campaign was founded. So I'm going to take all these interviews, I'm going to put them on the web so they're available to everybody in the world. And then I'm going to take factions of 4 women, 4 role models, and take them to high schools, dance schools, private schools, anyone that will listen and open up a dialogue with South Asian women about what we're up against. And show them that here is a role model that looks just like you. Now the thing is, of course, I have a little ways to go because I still have to finish funding it, I still got to finish editing it, and I certainly need to market it, and I've already heard a lot of no's. But I'm small, but I'm scrappy. And I'm just going to keep going until I hear yes. Thank you.
I picture a world where we walk side by side. I picture a world where everyone has equal opportunities. Empowering women, empowering humanity. Picture it.
Our next speaker served as Director General for International Affairs and Security Affairs in Iceland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she was the head of the Advisory Commission Secretariat at the UN Relief and Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees. Please welcome the permanent representative of Iceland to the United Nations, Greta Gunnarsdóttir.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how happy I am to be with you here today to finally launch the campaign on Beijing+20. In Iceland, we are so much convinced that this is the way to go, to focus on the implementation of the commitments that we have made. And these commitments are all in this book. This is the Beijing Declaration and the Beijing Platform for Action. These are very good documents, and the world will be a much better place if we finally decide to implement these commitments. Let's pick up the tools that we have at our disposal to really accelerate their effective implementation. Let's make full use of social media to mobilize as many people as possible around the globe, especially the younger generation. Let's reinforce our efforts to engage men and boys, as has been repeatedly mentioned here today. And we are willing to join Suriname on the Barbership Conference. And the He4C campaign, I just wanted to mention that because it is a fantastic tool to ensure that we celebrate Beijing+20 and that we really get men on board. And it takes cooperation, and Iceland will work with others to ensure that we celebrate Beijing+20 in such a way that it will be meaningful for future generations. Let's move gender equality and women's empowerment to the top of a global agenda. Let's raise and praise Beijing, apply it to new challenges, get men on board, and let's never ever forget that women's rights are human rights, and that means they should be treated as such. Thank you.
I want to read what you're reading, but just maybe later. Okay, so now we have arrived at our last but certainly not least speaker. As some of you know, UN Women has been working intensively in South Sudan on the issues of women, peace, and security, including with women and girls who have been internally displaced as the result of the conflict. South Sudan is the country from which our next speaker fled at a very young age. 5 years after she arrived in the United Kingdom as a refugee, a modeling agency discovered her. She went on to become one of the top models in the world. But she never forgot the experience of fleeing home. As Goodwill Ambassador for UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, she's passionate about the importance of education in transforming the lives of young refugees, especially girls. Please join me in warmly welcoming Mlambo-Ngcuka.
All right, since it's all about women's right, like Mother always says, that's right, get to the point. So I don't want to keep you guys up too long. I am going to get to the point, like Mother says. She ran that house, that's for sure. So what a wonderful woman to have as an inspiration. I want to start off with my commitment to see equality and empowerment for women comes from a personal place. I was a refugee girl. As such, I was one of the most marginalized and vulnerable of all female population. At the tender age 12, I had to flee my home, hiding from the constant threat of violence on my journey to safety. My family was torn apart. When I arrived in the UK at the age of 14, I found myself in an alien environment and could not have easily fallen through, I could have easily fallen through the cracks of poverty and inequality, excuse me. But I didn't. Why? That's because my mother and father together fought to give me a better future. I benefited from the support of a strong woman, but also an enlightened man. So all you guys, you play a big part in this. They understood the power of education to transform girls' lives. It is education that gives me the confidence and skills to build a successful career in fashion industry. As a UNHCR ambassador, I speak in particular for displaced women and girls who make up around 50% of any displaced population. That's well over 20 million female worldwide. This is a population with high protection need, at a great risk of abuse and exploitation. But let me tell you, these are also women that have incredible courage and resilience. Mothers fight every day to protect their children. We must do all we can to support them by upholding their rights to education, to healthcare, to full community participation. I am also honored today to stand alongside UN Women and with Planned Parenthood Global through their international arm, Planned Parenthood support partners across Africa and Latin America to deliver comprehensive sexual and reproductive health information and services, keeping members of their generation healthy and informed. This is, yes indeed, this too is life-saving work. Because of engaged global citizens like these young people, and I know there are many more in this room, in 20 years we've seen a lot of progress in advancing and protecting the rights of women and young people to health and to education. But there is so much more to be done. I'm truly honored to be here with you all to carry forward the legacy of Beijing. Together we can picture and manifest a world that gender equality is a reality. Take my story as a symbol of what can be achieved, and please let's all come together and finally make women's rights as a human right as it is. So I'm very humbled to be here to join that initiative. Thank you so much.
So please welcome back the Executive Director of UN Women, Mlambo-Ngcuka, and also, as we're wrapping up, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to every person involved in putting this event together, and particularly thank you so much to the Apollo Theater for hosting it. We are so grateful to be in your presence.
I can't believe it's over. It's been a wonderful, wonderful evening. I want to thank you for spending this evening with us. I want to thank Deputy Secretary General. I want to thank all the speakers, the wonderful performers, of course, our MC who has been stunning in every way. I want to thank the Young Women team that worked very hard to pull this together. There were a lot of taskmasters, no-nonsense taskmasters. Everything had to happen on time and on budget. And there was my deputy, Mr. Skuri, who was sending me text messages in the evening, counting the number of people who were coming. This is how serious. Lope, Patricia, many people that I can count who worked very hard. Thank you, guys. I want to thank you, the audience. You really have been wonderful. We wouldn't have been able to enjoy or to have this without you. But there's one special person I want to thank, because we are in Harlem, we are in a community, and I just want to ask her to stand up as well. You know, in Africa, you don't give instructions to people that are your elders, but today I asked permission to do that. And that is none other than Queen Mother, that is known to many of you. And she is seen in the United Nations in many activities and events, but also she helped us a lot to organize the community. Thank you so much for doing this. Earlier on, we are marching to 2030, and I was just chit-chatting with the DSG. We are not aiming to have this done in 2030. We want to do front load, do a lot of things early. By 2030, we'll be chilling. My grandchildren will be saying gogo in my language. Grandma says gogo, gogo. I hear that people used to treat girls badly. Is this true? Because we can picture it, we will do it. You know, this has been a long journey. In 1848, in Seneca Falls, as you all know, here in New York, already women and men were advocating for gender equality. And we're still at it. This has to come to an end. And that is why the date, the sell-by date, has to be the date when, after the date, we will know that we've been able to bring an end to gender inequality. So this is an imperative for all of us. And in order to remember, I always shorten this by calling it the she imperative. All of the things that you heard today that are important to women. The S in that she imperative stands for safety of women. Violence against women, the insecurity that women experience, domestic violence, trafficking of women, early marriages, which is a form of dilapidating abuse of a child, being sent to be married to an old man, usually with a big stomach. And H standing for human rights. Human rights of women, as we heard, women's rights are human rights. And human rights of women are the most violated rights of our time. Women are denied rights and access to reproductive health and services. Sexual rights are violated and denied. Not just access to education, rights to education is what we are advocating for. And of course, training and literacy for women of all ages. access and rights to reproductive assets, including access to finance, decent work, paid work, and ensuring that there is equal participation of men and women in domestic chores, so that the unpaid care work is not only a burden of women. These are some of the rights that we are talking about. And of course, E standing for equal and empowered leadership, not token. Equal meaning that we should be able, long before 2030, to reach a point where we're not talking about 22% of members of parliament as women. We must reach 50-50, Baton. We must reach 50-50. We must be able, in corporations, not to have a situation where we're saying less than 5% of CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies are women. And yet we know that when women participate in the economy, they are able to even to enhance the performance of those companies. But this is not the reason why we should respect the right of women. We must do it because it's the right thing to do. But also, you cannot make an argument that is economic, because women can deliver in the same way as their colleagues in the workplace. So she is for the security of the women, H is for human rights, and E is for equal leadership, equal participation, and not token. Equal meaning that we should be able, long before 2030, to reach a point where we're not talking about 22% of members of parliament as women. We must reach 50-50. We must reach 50-50. We must be able, in corporations, not to have a situation where we're saying less than 5% of CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies are women. And yet we know that when women participate in the economy, they are able to even to enhance the performance of those companies. But this is not the reason why we should respect the right of women. We must do it because it's the right thing to do. But also, you cannot make an argument that is economic, because women can deliver in the same way as their colleagues in the workplace. So she is for the security of women, H is for human rights, and E is for equal leadership, equal participation, and not token leadership. The 21st century, therefore, is essentially when we should deliver for women. I said earlier on, this is not mission impossible. It is a mission of our time. We are the generation with a mission to complete this task and to finally end what has been the most tolerated violation of human rights since time immemorial. We must remember Frantz Fanon's quote, which says, "Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it, in relative opacity. It is our choice whether our generation will fulfill or betray our mission." Thank you and good night.
Du même endroit. I can hear you, Jerry, but I've got nothing on the mic.
In Kigali, she wakes up. She makes a choice. In Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah. In Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. In Lahore, La Paz, Kampala. Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman. You cry and I hear you. We are one woman. You hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman. Your hopes are mine, and we shame in Manila, Sultan boo. Though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman, your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman, you sing, I sing along. We are one woman, your dreams are mine, and we shall shine. We shall shine.
And one man he hears her voice, and one man he fights her fight. Day by day he lets go the old ways, one woman at a time.
Though she's half a world away, something in me wants to say, we are one woman, your victory saves us all. We are one woman, you rise and I stand tall. We are one woman, your world is mine, and we shall shine. Shine, shine, shine. We shall shine. Shine, shine, shine. We shall shine. Shine, shine,
You rise and I stand tall. We